Hi, this is Justina Agnieszka Chevalier. In prior video, I discussed the continuum that mind and senses are to know the reality. I would like to now address interactions between humans and animals that are described, like I said, as if a bird of flocks in social psychology, or in also described in Taoistic flow. How do we communicate, and do we have privacy? Because many ask that question. And is there such thing as a thought that is not mine? In fact, when it comes to thoughts, all of us, we need to think of a thought as if it was a sound. The way as now you can probably perceive a wind in that video, the thought is similar. Thought is never, without an effort, more than an information about the surroundings. And that information may be presented as something that I've experienced in the past. So for example, I close my eyes and it's a vision of me having my head smashed. So I may be scared. Okay, is that something that is going to happen? Well, no. There is no actually prediction of future, in a way. But there are warnings. And warning consists following that killing something else when it's suffering, kills self. That information actually gives us a warning in which, okay, there is danger. If I feel aversion, do not go there. And if there is something that is being harmed, go and prevent the fight, for instance, from happening by appearing and asking, is there anything that I can assist you in mediating that conflict with? That's an example. Of course, one needs to use the judgment, but many times that is enough and unloads the conflicts. And so the communication in own privacy is such. We all have only the thoughts that are conscious and own, related to reasoning and judgment, that requires an effort, and also conscious planning and envisioning, such as drawing self on a piece of paper slowly, that is identified as I am doing it. And similar phrases like speech here, this inner monologue, such as, oh, the tree is green here, I am passing by, it is nice. And I perceive that this is a conscious effort that I'm making to make such corroboration. While input from others present around is present the same as sound or perception of steps, walking, and that includes people's minds. And so that is privacy, which means I cannot corroborate what a person thinks, nor people cannot know what I am thinking or perceiving. But for example, if that child that is standing there and watching a pumpkin is joyful about a tomato, and I wish to have that tomato, and I am hungry, then if he eats that tomato, there is so-called social tasting. So I may, with closed eyes, taste the tomato, even though I am not eating it, because someone else is enjoying it. And that is not because I know that the child is actually eating tomato, nor that is because that child made an effort or has no privacy. It is just because, like sound of wind, we give one another information about surroundings, including from remote areas that appear in physical and bodily impressions as senses that are non-corresponding to immediate perceptions, parallel to it, and that appear with effort as a competition to reality when we do not move or take action and dismiss reality as if it is a static. Reality is not a static. And so, do I have again ownership of a child eating a tomato or an visual input of a tree? I don't. I see it. I looked at it, but if I see it or not, well, if it is in front of me, I would need to make a conscious effort to close my eyes, to not see that there is a tree. There is a tree. There it is. I see it. Do I have a choice seeing it? Well, no. I can tune it out, but I am going to see it. Is that my thought or my input, or somehow does that invade privacy that somebody else, for instance, sees that tree? Well, answer that question yourself. It does not. And so the same is with remote information and in flow and social psychology, kinetic also movement similar to ballet, so that we don't crash towards one another. And sometimes it includes intimate bodily functions. So we have an impression, okay, I am using, for instance, a restroom, and I have an impression now that somehow I have an impression of speech as if I was not alone. Why that is? Well, it is because, for instance, we share a common canalization. And so though I have an impression that I am performing intimate bodily functions in conjunction with others, we actually do not know that. Meaning I am by myself and the other persons are by themselves, and unless we sit down and say, did you use the restroom when I was using the restroom, we did not decide to use that restroom together, nor we actually give in awareness information on what the other one is doing or any sort of comments. That is especially good for targeted individuals, because sometimes the for instance, action that has more benefit to self causes by aversion a use of for instance, I wanted to use a common toilet, but actually there is no common toilet, it is closed, so I'm directed towards another thing without knowing, just walk there. And so it feels like the walking is automatic, but the fact is that because of persons who are using the toilet, my mind and senses perceives, not knowing yet that there is a toilet, and I take chances going there. I can know for sure. What can we know? For sure there is a toilet. But am I going to find it? Well, that depends. Is it going to be disoccupied? It depends. See, those are things that we cannot know, and that's why it is true that mind reading and all that mind content is inaccurate. Is it pathology? Like I said, if I sit here and I feel, okay, I'm seeing tree, but in my mind I see toilet. And even though I want to use that toilet, I do not make a connection, because I read that in mind content that is an intrusive thought, and instead I take a Xanax and sit, or a beer, and sit here and say, no way, I don't want to have mind content that is not real, because that is unrealistic. Well, that is false move, because it is information that is pertinent to me if I just move and use the toilet. And that is then when the tree will become in visual field, in proximity, possible to be a toilet, and from mind the toilet disappears without any sort of adjuvants or medications to ignore it. So again, use those things also as a general practitioner or mind expert with such information. There is no pathology, in fact, in anything. And that mind and fantasy is actual information about reality. And that is the same for the police officers, because there are some persons that arrive, and I saw that in a documentary, and ask a Latin American girl, are you hearing voices? Well, if she is hearing voices, it is because somewhere farther away somebody is talking, and that is pertinent to her survival or amelioration of her conditions always, and at the same time of that of others always, alike displacement on rollerblades. And so the answer is, if yes, it means, okay, well, maybe I can drive you there. Can you specify it? And police works with also persons who specifically concentrate on mind in hours of meditation, such as Zen monks. Can I drive you there to see what it is over there that we can work out? Because it may be, for instance, that I am needed, and that's why you and I are in the same place. And there is always the source, and that takes away from the mind the anguish of not having that in person, yet being ridden by it. So understanding that is very beneficial, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, of course, fantasy. If I sit and dream about Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson is the best guru of, for instance, martial arts I've ever met. And I sit and I visualize how I am going to be exercising and how I'm going to be doing this and that. And I don't actually, do that, but sit here on, touching the table. Then I am not really exercising, even if I perceive pleasure, and he is having another disciple somewhere else and is exercising. And that is, of course, satisfying, but see, there is then no pursuit of own happiness or dream and not living reality when we disjoin mind from sensual input instead of picking up the phone and saying, okay, I'm calling Mr. Johnson today, he has free class today, and I'm going there and I'm going to exercise, and then from instead of pleasure to in mind to fantasize about exercising, I am actually in front of Mr. Johnson exercising the martial arts that I wanted to try. That's an example. The same is with all of personal relationships, and so we need to know that in those images that we do not decide upon, be it pleasant or not, aversion is a stronger sign that survival is at risk to action, while a pleasure is actually stronger move that there is enough safety and satisfaction in the area to ameliorate conditions to the next level. And that is when moving towards that a source of pleasure, we actually get a amelioration of conditions. And so we often have to know that it is just a tool, simple like in an ant, and all animals possess it. If I see in my mind a wolf, that wolf will come. If I see in mind wolf that is hungry, and we talk, for instance, about grapes, we can miscommunicate, and for instance, it will grab instead plastic grape, like that happened to me, instead of the one I had in the car that was real one. But it will come, and that is quite accurate. When we lie about it and pathologize and sit non-stop, imagine, for instance, a bulk. Bulk feels like 100 miles away there is a deer that he actually wishes, because he feels strong feelings of love, to spend his life with. So he sits, and he sits, and instead of actually going after there, running there to share whatever it is that she's eating, he sits and thinks, that is not real. I am gonna instead sit down by the tree, close my eyes, and fantasize about the deer. So he sits there and sits there. Then imagine the bulk turns off TV, has a beer, sleeps, and then he goes afterwards and says, "Whoa, gee, there's no deer." Or if there is, it's already occupied by another bulk and has 3 children. Well, that is because we separated fantasy and took as sufficient dreaming about it, making about it movies, as opposed to acting and moving in the area towards that as a cognizant tool at all times. And then when that happens, and that deer is actually happy to see that bulk, for instance, she actually manifested by joy and delight from seeing it, because he ran, for instance, 20 miles, as opposed to saying, "I don't know what you're talking about, go away, because you're gonna think I am crazy now." Or, that is another 5 or 10 years, meditate a little bit, because right now I am gonna collect some fruits. And those fruits then I'm gonna plant for the wolves. And that is what then leads to miscommunication when it comes to a continuity. So in medical practice and mind practice, we need to know that pathologizing, declaration of strong perception of a tick of an urge to move hand, is because that hand forms in a dynamic way a whole and is supposed to signalize something. So it may mean that a person needs to elevate that hand to turn on the light to see better because the eyes are tired. And not necessary giving right away an anticholinergic or antipsychotic is the way to go, because we can sedate the person to death and have a cadaver in a consultory chronically ill, while the bulb is still dim and the person still cannot see very well. Those are examples. So chapter 11 is entitled "The Extent of USA Slogan, Killing It Kills Stop." Who and how we actually hurt when we hurt another person, and when it seems natural to feel safe. Well, from that mind and precognition and immediate senses, and then concomitant input, as opposed to tools of the same, which removes what is a tool of remote detection to the tool of immediate detection. I cannot, for example, fantasize about a bulk and a bug and sing a bug in front of me. I cannot hear a woman speaking in my mind, when a woman is actually talking to me, cancels need for medications and that perception of being abnormal or in a wrong place. And so that is what that slogan slightly addresses. When it's natural to feel safe, when mind and body combined feel comfortable, at ease, and sleep is possible, that is when it is okay to feel safe.